Welcome to the Church Collective podcast. In this episode, I had the chance to talk with the guys from Elevation Rhythm, and there is just a ton of insight to be able to be gleaned from this episode. I hope you enjoy it. Here we go.
It's a fun time for Elevation Rhythm. We just dropped our very first project titled Growing Pains. We dropped it on April 1st of this year. This is after about 11 singles and 2 years of just kind of testing out like what people love and, you know, growing within our own writing and producing abilities. So like now we've just dropped our first 12-song project, and it's been a really crazy time just watching people experience something that we've been working so hard for behind the scenes. And so, yeah, it's exciting times for Elevation Rhythm.
Yeah. So this was all created during lockdown. Like maybe talk a little bit about, my goodness, like of all the times, like what was that like?
I think as a shift happened, I guess, with Elevation Rhythm when we wrote Quiet. One of our singles, we wrote it during maybe like 2 months into the lockdown.
Yeah.
And I think that is when a shift started to happen with the sound and with like what we wanted rhythm to really be and what God really kind of showed where rhythm was headed. And it really molded our songwriting process to really be thinking through the lens of like, oh man, what are people really going through right now? And what do they really need to hear? And for us, not really having service, we're really able to develop our own skills and really it almost gave us like the luxury to dream a little bit bigger and to explore and like, oh man, like, because sometimes I think we think through the lens of like, okay, we have service coming up, so we need to be writing things through the lens of like, okay, this context, but knowing that context can change all the time, we kind of broke that barrier of thinking through that lens and really just being even more open-handed with like what we could do with rhythm and what it could possibly be.
1,000%, because we didn't have to worry about, well, the new song needs to be predictable because the room needs to be able to sing it because there was no one in the room. And so it was like, essentially all the awkward moments are just going to be between us if we don't know the song properly, but now we get to present them in a way that's authentic to the way we wrote them in the room. And so that was really, it was a special, weird time to be writing music. It took all the limitations off of kind of like what we're so used to presenting to church.
Right. Talk a little bit about, like, let's start with Quiet. Like, what were you guys feeling when you were like putting that song together for the church?
Yeah, it really came from the feeling of like God wanted us all. I mean, God had us all in this state of isolation where we couldn't really do much. It's not a punishment, or it's not like a prison. It's really just a moment that we could actually utilize and like really exercise, be still and know that I am God. Like that, the scripture of just like being still and then really getting him to really like kind of grasp like, oh my God, like this, like I want to know you more. And sometimes to know you more, I just need to be still and be quiet.
Yeah.
And I need to stop, quiet the noise, quiet the anxiety, quiet all the things, and really just like understand like this is who God is, and this is who God is. This is who he needs to be in my life. This is what he's going to do in my life. And I think that was really like the heart behind Quiet, is to really know that we were going through that and we needed a song like Quiet in our own state of like isolation and almost like the self-dialogue and the inner dialogue we were having, but then knowing that like if we need it, we're just knowing that maybe more people need to hear this song as well.
Right. And I mean, the message still stands today. It doesn't require a lockdown for it to be applicable.
Right.
Yeah, it felt like a great reminder that like our homes were starting to feel like prisons because we just couldn't escape from it. But then we're like, what if we looked at our homes not as a prison, but almost like a palace in the perfect place for God to speak to us? It's like, well, maybe isolation isn't meant as a punishment, but as a privilege if we just kind of change the way that we look at it. And so that's why the verses kind of feel so chaotic, that like da 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 da, da. It just kind of feels like, oh man, like this all this noise that we're being so focused on, but now it's all being stripped away, and it can either be lonely or it can really just help you channel your focus into, actually, this is what I need to be listening to. And so God, you speak and I'm willing to take the time to listen to you.
Yeah. That's good. I'd love to, like, because there's definitely like you guys are putting musical elements into the stuff that are like, I say musical, everything's musical, but like you're conveying meaning through the music that you're putting in there. I know, like in a lot of ways, when we're trying to write worship music, it's almost like the singability and the anthemic nature of it is key. Could you maybe talk about that tension of like trying to write stuff knowing full well that it kind of strays from, what I guess we all consider norms at this point?
Yeah, I think it is a little bit it's kind of like tempting a lot of the times to like always want to be like, I just want something that the masses can sing. I just want something that everyone can sing. And I think that what we've learned a lot is that like sometimes when you just focus on one, you actually like it actually like resonates with way more people than you think. I think when you try to focus on the masses, then you almost like you're casting this wide net and hoping that you can at least get something. But it's just like, well, some of these songs, we didn't really try to cast such a wide net. We really thought about specific stories that we may have heard from our like different e-groups or like from different people who are walking with people. And we really kind of kept it, sometimes we kind of tried to keep it as singular as possible. And whether it's personal to us or it's like something within our community. And I think what happens is it actually does the same thing. Like it still reaches multiple people, it still reaches, and I think that is when it's a different mindset to have when it comes to writing, because we're, like you said, like we're so used to being like, this is gonna go crazy on Sunday morning. Everyone's gonna be singing this out. And just, most of our songs aren't, that's not what we're thinking through that lens. And it takes a lot of it takes a lot of selflessness to not think through that lens, because you want things that people can sing right back to you. Because it almost gives you like this instant affirmation of like, okay, this is like you like it because you sing it back to me. But when we sing these songs, and a lot of times they just kind of sit and listen, you kind of get that response, that outwardly expressive response, but it does not mean at all that it's not resonating with them. It's just, honestly, they're just really letting it speak to them.
We've almost adapted the sense of like embrace the awkwardness, because we're teaching, it's almost like we're teaching I don't want to say a new way of worship, but a different way of worship. I think we've been so cultured to look at worship as a genre or as a style, when for us it's really a posture of your heart. And so we're okay with understanding that, some of our songs, people aren't going to know how to move or how to clap their hands. They're going to want to watch, but maybe they're not watching, but they're actually taking in the lyrics and they're taking in the content that maybe they would have missed because they would be just like, oh, 4 on the floor, And so we've just embraced the awkwardness of understanding, hey, this is a new way that we're trying to give people just a new glimpse of what worship can actually be, and take the limitations off of maybe what they're so used to experiencing in church.
Yeah. I mean, I love that you guys are like working that through. Do you have any advice for, the worship leader, or, probably the senior pastor that's hearing this is like, nah, not my church. Like, it's got to be full participation all the time. Like, what would you encourage them? Because I love, like, worship is so much more than just being able to sing along. And even whether you sing along or not, like, you can digest the lyrics and still worship the Lord through that. But, I can hear the worship leaders being like, like, that's not going to work here. Like, do you have advice for them to like move towards some of that?
Yeah, the biggest advice is like, hey, like, I think it's not just meeting people where they're at, but also leading them somewhere. And if part of your leadership is always kind of keeping your church comfortable, then are you really leading them, or are you just kind of, just being good to them? And so, but it is so hard. And so the way that we try and kind of manage that tension is by putting in all these like new songs or songs that are maybe different in the middle of songs that we know that they're going to sing. So it's like, hey, we're going to start with like a song that we know that we're going to maybe go into a song that you're a little bit unsure of, but then maybe pair it up with the old classic, old faithful, like a hymn to tag onto it. So then now people feel a little bit more like, oh, I kind of think I know now what the song's about, and then hit them with another song that they fully know. So it's really all about like where you position them to maybe help with that kind of bridging that gap of, hey, they're not going to sing it, but we're going to give them a little bit more, something to look forward to towards the end. But we're always kind of like, hey, we believe that in the next 10 years, the songs that people are finding hard to sing to are going to be the normal songs that they're actually going to be singing in the
True.
future. So, like if you want to do it, if you want to be a pioneer, you're going to embrace that awkwardness.
It's growing pain.
It is growing
Right.
pain.
There it is. That's great. Talk a little bit now. I mean, so you started from like the quiet, and now you guys are, back fully going. What does it look like now? I mean, you've kind of described a little bit of it, but maybe just speak to the, now that some of these songs came out of that time and now they're all in a corporate setting, like what's church look like for you guys right now?
Well, first off, as a team, I think we've grown as a team. I think when Quiet came, it was only like 3 of us, and now there's like 12 of us. And so, like, we've come out of this as a bigger group and more of a collective. And so, I mean, church, obviously we're back in church every Sunday. Most of the people who are part of Rhythm were either at different locations or different campuses leading at those locations. We're starting to implement a couple more rhythm songs into our Sunday mornings. Like as they come, like we said before, like not all our songs are meant for Sunday mornings, and so but the ones that are, like we're definitely doing them on Sundays. And yeah, we've just been back in a groove. It's a new groove, but it feels good to really be back into a groove. And I'm trying to make the rhythm. But,
Yeah.
And so trying not to do. I'm not trying to say that, but yeah. Get back into a groove of things, and
yeah, it's been cool also because our main avenue for Rhythm is our youth worship nights that we kind of do at our church, and it's been really fun to see that, like, now that we kind of took them on a journey of, hey, like these are the songs that we're going to be doing, and now it just seems so normal within our context that even the songs that we didn't necessarily write to be done in church, they beg for. They're like, hey, give us meant to be, like, because give us Has Anyone Left You High and Dry, which were songs that were just like, they're probably just going to be more studio listening songs, but those are the songs that go so hard in a youth service. And so it's been fun to kind of see, oh no, like when they trust the people leading them, they'll follow no matter what it sounds like, and they're okay with kind of being taught a new way of worship.
Yeah, that's great. Talk a little bit about like your style. Are you, what are you pulling from? Like what, I guess, what's inspiring you? Yeah, everything. It's kind of figured that'd be the answer. Yeah.
Yeah, I think our goal is really just to understand when your demographic is young and young adults, and our genres play around like in the pop side, you have to stay flexible, and you have to stay open-handed with it. And so we try not to dig too deep into too many different styles and lock ourselves into it, because the moment you do that is the moment you kind of put a date on whatever you're doing. And so our style is really going to always be based off of who, like when we are leading, who do we see in front of us? Because our responsibility is to lead the people that we've been entrusted to lead with our youth and our young adults. And so right now we look out there and we see kids who love hip hop, we see kids who love rock, we see kids who love like singer-songwriter stuff. And so we're going to meet them where they are, and we're going to make music that they can relate to. And then 10 years from now, we're like making robotic techno.
There you go.
If we got to do it, we got to do it.
Yeah.
And so obviously we have preferences, and we have like styles that we bring, that we pull from. And I mean, it ranges from like, obviously, of course, like Elevation Worship and Pastor Stephen and the house, and like the house is kind of like built on those type of songs. And then the Kirk Franklin's and how he kind of like transcended through, like, I was listening to his album the other day, and he kept saying like, all my young people. And so it's like, even like how Kirk Franklin kind of got started with like really kind of like going for the next generation. And then on the other side, like I love Kanye West. I love his production style. And I love Pharrell. And yeah, who do you like?
Yeah, I mean, one of my biggest inspirations definitely is like John Mayer, and just his writing, how he's just able to tell stories, but they also love the pop influence of Justin Bieber and his band. And so like, stylistically, our team is just, we love so much different genres and different types of music, and getting in the room and creating music that we all love is kind of like the picture that we try to create. It's almost like like we're trying to almost blend Christ revelation with like cultural relevancy. And so whatever that kind of looks like in the moment and in the times, like we're just trying to meet people where they're at.
Yeah. Which, I mean, that's biblical. That's all throughout. Paul did a lot of that throughout the New Testament. Yeah, that's awesome. You mentioned like elevation worship. I'd love to hear just what's the, I'd say tension. It's not really tension, but like, what does it look like to have elevation rhythm and elevation worship? Like, just what does that look like practically for your church?
It's so hard.
We hate them.
Oh, it's the worst.
Right. Yeah.
They have Grammys and we have grannies.
Gosh, there you go.
It's actually like, it is I think we're more different than, we're very much alike, but we're also very different. And
Sure.
so there's a lot of crossover just because it's like we're all under the same house.
Yeah.
But I think their elevation worship has established itself in a way over the past like 10 years. And we're such a baby. It's even weird to even like try to like be like, oh yeah, we're in the same situation and we're in the same thing. And so I think we love to embrace the fact that we have the opportunity to do it completely different. But we also have the blessing. I mean, what a blessing is to have such a ministry that paved the way and has learned a lot of lessons that we don't have to learn now. And they've opened up doors that we don't really have to open up, and we get to follow behind them. And I think, but it's our mission to also just not to take that for granted and become like a carbon copy of it, but to really like honor that by pushing even further and being like, hey, like we're gonna honor all the work y'all have done, and we're not just going to repeat the same things y'all did, but we're really going to see how we can even help elevation worship by kind of going in lanes and going into spaces that they're not really in yet. And so we partner up with them, but it's definitely like big brother, little brother.
It is.
That's awesome. What so the album's been out for a little bit. Like what kind of feedback are you guys seeing on it at this point?
It's been incredible to just see like how many people are loving all the different types of songs. So I think usually like on a normal project, you have like 1 or 2 songs that everyone constantly talks about, but it's been really cool, like any kind of the teenagers that we kind of speak to and a lot of the audiences that we have connections with, it's always a different song. It's always like, oh, I love, Over and Over. Those are for like the, 16-year-old girls who just love worship and they just love reading their Bible to Spotify. It's like, oh, I love Over and Over. Then we have like some of our like 16-year-old boys who just like love rap and just like love going to parties. And they're like, oh man, Back Then is my song. And then we speak to someone who's just like so much more of a chilled person. They're like, I just love the way Trust ministers. And so it's been really cool to not just have like one specific 1 or 2 songs that are like make the project, but to hear people always just pick out a different type of song is very helpful, because we wanted the entire project to almost feel like a playlist where like we're part of the playlist generation where these kids are on Spotify and on Apple and they're combining, like Kirk Franklin and Jesus culture and Bethel, and then also have Justin Bieber and Billie Eilish all on the same playlist. And our project kind of does that for them. And so that's been like a really great highlight so far.
That's awesome. Have you guys had did you have like a launch worship night or anything like that to go with it? How'd that go? Yeah. So
we had a listening party about 2 days before the project actually dropped. And so our rhythm nights are kind of like our main youth nights. Yeah. And so for that specific night, we actually, we turned the whole auditorium into a listening party. We didn't have the band on stage. It was literally just the album that we played. And it was the first time that they got to hear back the project that we recorded in December. And they went wild. It was crazy. We were so afraid because it was, again, something new. We're always trying to break the boundaries of like, okay, well, what's a listening party supposed to be like, or worship night? Well, the band has to play it. We're like, what if the band has nothing to do with it? And we literally just play the album front to back, and they loved it.
And so it was literally just room, nobody on stage, just play the album. And then we're talking like teenagers, right? Paying attention to it.
we're talking 800 teenagers put on the floor in one of our campuses. We kind of set up like a little stage on the ground, but it was just kind of just with like us helping kind of keep the energy going. And they listened to every song, the worship songs, they were worshiping, hands raised. The songs that they needed to jump up and down, they were jumping up and down. So it really was like, man, like if this is the same experience someone else can have in their car or in their dorm or in their kitchen, like that they're having in the same room that we're listening to the project in, and that's honestly like the goal of the songs.
Wow, that's cool. What advice do you have for like a younger worship leader trying to lead this broad, I mean, like you said, that everybody's playlist generation, like what advice we have for the guy that's in a youth group with just 100 teens trying to lead them in worship? Like what should they do?
Yeah, I think for me, it's like, I try always lead from a place of like knowing who I'm leading. And so the place that we always started, like all these songs that we wrote were from the conversations we were having with our teenagers. Like Quiet came from us getting in a room and it's like, man, like we all lead small groups. Hey, like tell us, like, what was your last small group about via Zoom? Because that was what we're all kind of doing, you know, it was just like, man, our kids are just alone and like, they're just struggling and they want to try and figure out like, will things go back to normal? And so we're always trying to write and lead from a place of knowing the people that we're leading. And so my first thing would be like, hey, it's so much easier to lead teenagers when they trust you and they know you. And so if you can find a good way to do that, even if it's just like knowing 10 of them, and those are the 10 that help lead the rest of the room with you, that makes a massive difference. But then also to lead from a place of vulnerability. And so when you're sharing, hey, why we're singing the songs and why we're leading them and why we're doing this, then it kind of opens them up because they're more open to see transparency than just being told what to do. And so I think those are like two great places to start, and then be confident in what God has given you, because like no one else can do what you do the way God has called you to do it. And people will follow you once they see that you're being true to who you are, not just trying to be someone else.
Yeah, that's really good. I'd love to hear, what's your guys' story? Like, how'd you get involved with all this?
with Elevate and like,
yeah, just like how did you get into worship leadership and then now at Elevation? And
I mean, I've been producing since I was a kid, almost like 16, 17. I've done way more work in the hip hop world, and I just it's a pretty lonely music industry. And so long story short, I just kind of didn't really feel like I was really getting developed as a man. I just felt like I was just being almost like glorified for my acts, but no one really no one really cared beyond whatever I was doing. And I think it felt like empty. And so that's when I started just kind of wanted to left everything and started going to church. And I was going to church for maybe like 3 or 4 years, not really doing much. And I think I met you guys maybe like 2 years ago, and I met Davide and Tiff, and we had a writing session. And that was probably one of the first times I started like making music again. And it was the first time I make music that was for the Lord. Wow. And it was just so different, but it was different in all the best ways. Like before we even made a song, we talked for hours. And I think that's just like, it was like, oh, it's deeper than just about what I'm here to do, which is to make a song. It's about like who we are and like where our hearts are. And I think that we connected on a heart level before we even made a sound. And I think that's what really brought me to Elevation Rhythm, and the fact that they just embraced me in my craziness and how like I didn't know how to make worship music, and I didn't play acoustic guitar, and so I was kind of coming in with just beats, and I was I was just making beats, and they looked at it as like, let's go. And so that's kind of like how I kind of hopped on to the rhythm team.
And awesome. He's been such an integral part of the metamorphosis of where rhythm is. It was very important for us. If we felt like, man, we're trying to reach the next generation and we're trying to do it differently. And so we needed to find someone who is different, and Josh is definitely different. And I'm sure you hear it in the music that we've kind of been creating and producing. For me, I my wife and I moved to America in 2017 to be a part of Elevation Church. We kind of were from South Africa, and we just stumbled upon Elevation Worship on YouTube one day and fell in love with just the ministry and the songs that were just impacting so many people. We happened to be one of those people. And my dream, I grew up in my parents' church, and my dream was always to just kind of be a part of like just the next wave of, hey, like what does worship look like for the next generation? And so being able to then kind of into our youth ministry here at Elevation Youth and being able to serve under Pastor Stephen and Tim Summers, our youth pastor, who just, they so much believe in like, hey, like we believe that our church is called to keep on pushing the ministry forward. And so they just entrusted us to just start with remixing Elevation worship songs. That's where Elevation Rhythm started. It wasn't just like, it was, hey, like we want you guys to write songs. It was just like, hey, just do what you think the next generation in our church needs. And it just started with remixing Elevation worship songs and then writing little choruses and bridges here and then. And then it kind of became like, hey, writing our own songs. And then it became, oh, what are you doing with the songs that you've written? Well, let's create something. And so rhythm wasn't always like, hey, like this is going to be for the world. This is going to be for our youth and our teenagers in our church. And okay, if that means that we get to put them on Spotify and the world gets to hear them, awesome.
Yeah, I think that's a really good place to start for writing, for sure. Like think about, like you guys have said, like think about the people you're actually leading rather than, you know, whatever lofty aspirations are for the Spotify plays or anything like that.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode. As always, make sure to connect with us on Instagram, TikTok, find us on Facebook, LinkedIn. We are all over the place. Can't wait to chat with you.